All right, let's check and see. We've got our participants coming on, and while everybody's coming on, I will welcome everyone to our last May in Motion webinar of 2021. Can't believe that we're in our last week of May in Motion, and we're excited to bring you how busy parents can overcome smart commute obstacles. So before we get started, I'll remind you that we do have the Q&A box, so you can add in any questions that you have for Lisa. And also stick around towards the end, because we'll also do a little drawing for a prize pack for May in Motion, as well as it has a gift card to Eat Local. So we will we'll draw that here at the end. So before we begin, I just want to thank our amazing sponsors for May in Motion this year. They are our partners and supporters of May in Motion and everything we do here at Commuter Ride. These sponsors believe in our mission in reducing vehicle miles traveled on our roadways and reducing the air pollution and traffic congestion while producing happier, healthier, and wealthier commuters. So this year, Valley Regional Transit is our title sponsor and is providing at no cost transit for the entire month of May in support of May in Motion. So there are a few more days to take advantage of enjoying the Valley's transit system and how it can work for your needs, whether that is for commuting or just getting around in our community. So thank you, Valley Regional Transit, for that. So before we begin, we have the honor of hosting today's webinar with Valley Regional Transit Smart Routes to School Director, Lisa Brady. Lisa and I have personally known each other since actually 2012, I want to say, and literally has been walking the talk. And in 2011, and Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you literally traded in your car for your bike, and you've not really looked back. You oversee Safe Routes to School here in the Treasure Valley since 2013. She is the president of Treasure Valley Cycling Alliance and is chair of Ada County Highway District's Bicycle Advisory Committee, which she has served on since 2015. Lisa's goal is to see biking and walking curriculum in all Idaho schools in driver education classes, both public and private, believing that we must educate everyone in transportation. And I second that. So without further ado, Lisa, I will let you take over the reins.
Thanks so much, Nicole, and it's truly my pleasure to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, not using my car or encouraging other people not to use their car for every trip that they take. And I actually traded my car in 2010 for the bike. In 2011, we took a huge bike trip from Alaska to Boise. And so yes, it's true, I haven't ever looked back from this. So without any further ado, truly, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just go into my presentation. It's not a super long presentation. I do encourage you to put any questions that you have in the chat. The subject that we're talking about today in smart commute options for parents with children going to school can be a controversial topic, and I would love to entertain questions about concerns, supports, anything, and I will go over a few of those things and address them right straight away. So without any further ado, I will share my screen, and Nicole, if you can let me know when I can share my screen. And I can't hear you.
You are allowed to share your screen now, so thank you.
Fabulous. All right, so without any further ado, we'll go right into it. And can you see my screen all right?
Yes, perfect.
All right, perfect. So the Safe Routes to School program is currently hosted through Valley Regional Transit. We're really pleased to have continue our relationship with VRT. We started full-time with them in October after being with the Y for quite a long time. Safe Routes to School has been around for, well, I'd say since about 2000 and 7 or 8, somewhere in there, and it's been growing. So this is a little picture of our bike club that we host every, let's see, spring and fall at the Whitney Community Center. We teach young people how to get around in their neighborhood after school through their community programs. So we are a small but mighty team, and we have a lot of little volunteers out there. And the kids that you see in this picture now, over half of them are now in junior high, and they're hard to recognize. It's fun to go back and look at this photo. But these kids actually do ride their bikes to school, and we've had an instrumental, well, I guess I want to say we've been an instrument in their success for that. So I want to start out with just a couple of our things that we think about when we think, how can I possibly let my kids walk or bike to school? How can I change my way of thinking? And one of the biggest things that we look at is time. Our schools start around 8:40 to 8:45 for elementary level, much earlier than that for middle school, and earlier than that for high school. And time is always a huge issue, but when we look at the picture on the right, time waiting in a motor vehicle is something that we don't address. How can we save some time by encouraging biking and walking to school? And I'll go over a few of those things in just a moment. The next thing I think about is the big S, which is safety. And this is something that we have probably foremost in our minds next to time. What we think about are the dangers of traffic itself. There's so many cars in the parking lot. There's so many people on the roadway. There are other people out there, and depending on who we're talking about, we might call that stranger danger or people we just don't know. The distance can be a challenge. What we think is a long way might not always be a long way. The light outside, whether it's daylight or if it's during daylight savings time, we have some issues with darkness, and we worry about that. One common thing that I hear a lot of times is about our sleepy kids and our busy kids. I'd like to let my kids sleep in longer. My kids are too busy. I've got lacrosse and soccer, and I've got music and reading class and everything else after school, and 5 kids to ferry around and all of that. That can be very real. And we hear a lot about inflexible work schedules. So what we know is that traffic is reduced with increased walking and biking trips. And it's interesting when I talk to parents about these things, we talk about, oh, it's not safe to cross even through the parking lot because there's so much traffic. Well, if we reduce that traffic, it actually is safer for kids to walk or bike. More people on the street makes the street active. It makes it safer. There are more eyes on the street, and these are our neighbors that we're walking by. I always suggest to test the distance to school. Think about that. How far is it for my student to walk? Can I liberate them to walk or bike to school because it's only a mile or a mile and a half? The studies show that around 2 miles is kind of a breaking point for most of us. 2 miles feels like a long way. There are commuters out there that ride 30 miles or 20 miles or 6 miles, but when we talk about young people and parents, 2 miles is probably a really reasonable distance to think about. We also know that activity wakes up the brain. So students that have taken an active trip to school actually are more engaged. Just as a point of order here, yesterday I was at Star Elementary School, and we were waiting for a second class to come in. And so during that first waiting section, I had all the kids stand up and do 10 jumping jacks, and then we did 10 squats, and we all sat down. That was an engaged class. They were pumped up, their blood was flowing, and they had a lot of questions. And we just know that activity does help us. So walking and biking to or from school is a really good idea. And it turns out that for us as adults, parents that are also taking that active trip, maybe with our kids or to work by ourselves, we're more ready for work or whatever we're doing when we get there after that active trip. And the real question on the table for me when I was thinking about this presentation is a work schedule as inflexible as it used to be. There are a lot of different options now that we have for working from home, which provides opportunities for us as well. We're very mobile with our work, so how can we use that to our advantage? A couple more things about safety, because my nickname is Safety Officer Brady, and I teach safety for my job and encourage people to be out there and be safe. Some of the things that we think about on a safe trip when we're thinking about letting our children move in different ways, use the buddy system. Make a route and stay the course of that so they know what's going on. I like to be aware of the surroundings when I'm out there walking, whether it's what's behind me if I'm biking on the roadway or what's around me when I'm walking. So we look for landmarks, common places to find safety, neighbors that you can wave at, dogs that we can visit, and also pay attention to what the land use is around where you're walking or biking. Those things dictate what kind of traffic you're going to be dealing with. So if I'm biking near a school, I know that I'm going to be dealing with drivers because people are choosing to drive because it doesn't feel safe. And we need to shift that thinking a little bit. If we're in an area where there are train tracks, we know that there could be trains. So, opening up our eyes to what's around us helps us determine what the safety factor actually is. You can actually sign up for a smart cycling class through Safe Routes to School. We are preparing to do some of those classes this summer so we can actually help get your kids and your family familiar with how to think about what that trip means to school or to work or to multiple schools or to a sports field. So it helps us all become more confident on the roadway. Now, just as a note to all of us as drivers, we need to look harder for people walking and biking. We need to pay attention to stop signs. Something that happened this morning that is the parent's worst nightmare is a school bus being involved in a crash. And that happened this morning in Valley View School District, where a bus and a SUV collided. The SUV driver ran the stop sign and collided with the school bus. And all of those vehicles were carrying people on their way to school. I just want to think about that for a moment when we think about how can we be safer. And the bus is actually a good way to get to school. And I'll stop right there with that one. But please do look for the people walking and biking. Now, every time I talk to somebody about biking, people apologize to me and say, oh, I should be able to, or oh, this, or oh, that. And I think we think about things like this when we think about taking our kids to school. We've got a bike train, we've got a bunch of things going on, we've got fancy bikes and bags and everything like that. How do they do that? People make lifestyle choices. This isn't for everybody. This doesn't have to be every day. There are these people in this area, but it's not common. So how can we bring just one of these trips to our lives or some change to our whole neighborhood? And let's talk about that. I like to let kids lead the charge on this. There are two things that Safe Routes to School across the whole nation think about, and these are bike trains and walking school buses. A note on bike trains, I had a great opportunity to meet a young leader of a bike train that is over in the north end of Boise. The Washington School is currently being remodeled. So those Washington School students are actually going to school over at the old Fort Boise Elementary on Fort Street. And for a few weeks now, I've seen this group of people biking, these young people biking. And I had the great fortune of meeting the leader of that bike train and talked to her a little bit about how did they actually come up with the bike train. And her mom happened to be there as well. So I asked, how do you let your kids do this? And they self-organized that. The kids decided that they were going to do that. They made their route. They're using a route that has a crossing guard on it so they can cross Harrison Boulevard safely. And they're paying attention to what's going on. And as far as I understand, there are a couple more of these bike trains that are coming from the Washington Elementary area. And it's a great thing. And I love the liberation of that. And I like the kids thinking about that. They're carrying instruments, some of them, they're carrying their books and backpacks. It's complicated, but it can be done. And it needs the kids to lead it. On the right-hand side, we have the walking school buses. And walking school buses are essentially just groups of people walking to school. This particular picture was taken by Idaho Smart Growth, and it's a walk to school day special event to show people you can actually walk to school. What these pictures show me are people being escorted to school by police, fire, mayors, other elected officials, and all the rest of the days we might not be walking to school. How can we shift that thought? How can we make it so walking to school is actually normal again? When we're working here in the Treasure Valley, we don't see a lot of roadways like this particular one where there isn't a sidewalk and there's barely a shoulder. We have a lot of sidewalks out there. We have opportunities to look for more sidewalks, to advocate for more to be put in. So I think letting the kids lead the charge and talking about safety is a really good idea. For you to think about these things, we have walk zone maps. And you may, if you're a parent in Boise or West Ada District, you may already be familiar with these things, but this is just a map that I pulled up for White Pine Elementary. This is an area where we're just riding just very recently. And White Pine Elementary School is just over here on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see a brownish color, which is your non-bus zone, or basically a walking zone. And you see arrows that tell you what the walking routes actually are. Now, if you would take a look up in the upper right-hand corner, we see a darker brown area, and that's it's a non-walk zone or a bus zone. And the reason for that is because it's not connected. The neighborhood streets are not connected to Dorothy Avenue up there, so the walk is much longer. And that's just a side note for everybody to think about when you're in your neighborhood. What are those connections? If we're looking at new builds, are we advocating for neighborhood connections to make walking and biking easier through a neighborhood instead of putting everybody out onto a main road? So these walking routes have arrows. They are not marked actually on the street. Some cities across the nation actually do put footprints or duck prints or whatever on the streets to show kids what is a safe route. But these are not marked. This is something that people do go over with their children to make sure that they understand. And I would suggest if you are doing something like this, that you do go out and walk that with your kids. So one of the things that I wanted to cover, and I'll go back to that slide and talk about that dark brown area, they're probably doing safety busing in that area. And what safety busing means is that the barriers for students to actually walk to school are so significant, they have to put a safety bus in that may be inside of the 1.5 mile walk zone area. And that's important to me because for one instance, the Spalding School has had a road expansion on Cloverdale, and we have a safety busing situation that's busing kids from across the street. And that's something that we should all be concerned about because we have traffic out there that's creating this barrier for people to be able to walk. Can we shift our commutes? Can we shift things that we're thinking about? And that's really important for me to think about. Safety busing does cost a lot of money, and there are really valid reasons for safety buses, including water barriers like the river or big canals or 5-lane arterials or I-84 or something else like that. So there are really valid reasons, but then there are very interesting reasons when we don't have connections. My last little bit here is just to give you some encouragement and the links to those walking maps, the West Ada walk zones or westada.org. It takes you right to those maps. The same as for the Boise School District. If you happen to be in Canyon County, one of our current projects for the next probably couple of years is getting these walk zone maps for Canyon County schools. And that's a huge undertaking, and we are still working on that. It doesn't have to be every day. Just make a plan. It doesn't have to be even twice a week. It could be once a week, and that would shift everything for a lot of people. You walk your route on a Sunday and you will find the ways that you should go. And if you form a group with other parents and share the leadership, it doesn't have to be you every week. It can be you once a month or you once in a while. I think that's pretty important to give ourselves a break. And you can reach out to us at the Safe Routes to School program for support. We have vests, we have signs, we have bike lights, helmets, all kinds of things that we can do to support your commute and to help your kids stay safe out there on the road. I have a ton more to say, but I will stop right there. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at my email here or my phone number at the bottom of the screen. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa. So we have one comment and a few questions. So there was a comment when you did talk about that active transportation before school and being engaged then as a student. Someone had said the book Spark shares that kids have higher math scores when they've had PE in a prior period. And so I can totally attest to that. And just seeing that difference. And I know my kids have done where it's jumping jacks, dancing and stuff before tests. And so I can imagine where you have a bike route or walking to and from school where it's not only just good exercise, but just feeds the brain getting ready for the day. So I could totally agree. So yes, we'll have to check out the book Spark.
Exactly.
So do not have an author, but I'm sure we can hunt it down. So you were talking about the walking school bus and bike trains, where I know being a Canyon County individual and not having those walking paths yet, but that doesn't mean that just because we don't have them doesn't mean that we can't figure it out on our own. So I know as a parent I can think like, oh, what would be a good route, but how does your mind go through when you're developing a route that a parent can just do at home? So how do you go about that?
So it's an interesting question. And I think automatically we think first and foremost, how do I get there in my car? And that's the thing that we have to take a step back from. And when I'm doing route planning, I end up using Google Maps a lot for my first looks and doing Google with the street view actually. And what I'm looking for is weird little routes from my house that might have connections. So connections come in super interesting ways. There are pathways that are connecting different neighborhoods. There are things that don't show up when you're driving. And I think that's why it's so important to actually do what we will call ground truthing when you're out there, to find out what is there on my trip? What side route is there? What connection is there? Who can I meet out there? And also, what are the big barriers, right? So is there a major intersection? Is there a double lane roundabout that looks really complicated to cross? And those things are just really important. So that's why I say, doing that thing on a Sunday is such a good idea, or Saturday if that's better for you, or a Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't matter to me, but Sundays are usually the less traffic days, and you have the opportunity to really explore your street. I think that's one of the most important things anybody could ever do, is just explore what's out there.
Right. I know we use that when we're encouraging people to try a smart commute for work. Try it on a Saturday or a Sunday and just kind of get used to it and feel it out. So there isn't necessarily that anxiety of feeling like on a Monday morning or any time where it's like you get used to the groove and then you're ready to go. And I know for my son and I, we live just about a mile away from his middle school. And when he graduated from elementary school to middle school, there wasn't the barrier of a major street and being able to have that. And not only did we do it on a Sunday, but I rode with them. And then it was, let's do this again. And then I would let him go in front and kind of just, okay, how we doing, what we're figuring out. And yeah, now graduating to high school where it's a different route, but how can we do that? And so for parents out there, do you have, I know in our subdivision, we literally were just texting parents and leaving signs on doors, seeing if they wanted to join Finn.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of just an organic way of trying a walking school bus or what have.
I think it is an organic way, and not everybody, it's not everybody's cup of tea, basically, right? And so we have some concerns. People have concerns, and I would love to allay that concern by what you're doing, going out and meeting the neighbors. Working with your neighborhood association is a good idea. Getting that message out, so when those neighborhood meetings happen, maybe inviting Safe Routes to come to the neighborhood meeting and say, here's some tools we can offer you for your walking school bus. Those things can be yellow captain vests, trinkets to encourage people, or miniature vests. We even have those. And I don't really like to wear a yellow vest, but I also see the power in that when you're doing that group action, and it makes people feel like they're part of something. So
Yeah,
I would continue to encourage that. And we would totally welcome anybody wanting to have information about that. We've got lots of resources to help with the walking school bus. Same with the biking school bus or the biking trains. I've seen things where they actually schedule times where we're going to be stopping and picking you up on the bike train. Same thing with the walking school bus. We'll be at your house at 7:52 or what have you. They've measured out. I like to keep in the back of my mind that we all get distracted when walking because squirrel or cool tree or whatever. So building in a little bit of extra time is a good thing. One of the things we didn't talk about is the post-school trip. When we have sports, when we have all these other things, and it can get really complicated, or if we have lots of kids, it can be very, very complicated. So those are things that, how can we tie those trips together better? I'm never against carpooling, ever. So, yeah.
Carpooling is good. Yes, we will take that. Yes. Taking your kid to school and dropping them off, technically, let's just fill up the car and alleviate that if needed. It's kind of on those days where, it's rained and no one's got the gear. Well, let's just improvise. And yeah. So
well, the other part of that, one thing I forgot to add on my slides was the remote drop off. So a lot of times parents feel like, I'm going to drop you off right in front of the front doors. How about the front doors of a house 6 blocks down to get that active, healthy trip? It doesn't have to be 1.5 miles. It could be just 2 blocks. That helps reduce the amount of traffic around a school. It improves the air quality around the school. It's measurable, the air quality differences from school drop off and pickup times to right in the middle of the day where you don't have those idling vehicles. So what can we do to mitigate traffic around school? Remote drop off, carpools, bike pools, walking pools, all of that will change the whole outlook. So.
Yeah, and that's huge. I never even thought about it because I do think about it for people's commutes, driving to a park and ride lot, and then, riding bike the rest of the way, or whether it's on the green belt. But doing that when you're commuting to school, that's perfect, where it's like getting used to that and then almost like backing it up on the days that you can, where it's like, do the full route on the days that you can, but just that mitigation of getting a little bit closer. But yeah, the need for not dropping them off right there at the front door. That's a great idea. That's a good first step for people.
Yep, it's a great first step.
Yeah. And every little bit counts. That is a huge thing. Well, I do have the author of that book. Spark is John J. Ratley, and the individual Eric said the drive and drop, love it. Probably saves the parent time on their trip too. So yeah, where I know where I drop off my son on rainy days, I used to pick up my carpool partner at that same spot. So it was perfect. So yeah, that's a great idea, Eric. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to cover today?
There's always something. So
that's true.
But there's just so much to this. I just want to remind everybody watching this and sharing this that you don't have to be perfect. it doesn't have to be every day. And that's one of the biggest reasons I hear is that, oh, I can't do it every day. I'm not going to try it at all.
Mm-hmm.
One trip a week, one drop off remote a week, not waiting in traffic 1 day a week. You know, make this plan for the 2022-23 school year or 2021-22 school year. That is a big deal, and we have an opportunity right now. So,
excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Well, before we wrap up, we do have where we'll do a little drawing here for a May in Motion prize pack. So I'm going to spin my wheel here. Shauna Samuelson. So we will contact you, Shauna, and get you a little May in Motion prize pack. So thank you everybody for joining us today and wrapping up May in Motion. It's great weather now, so so finish strong, whether that's telecommuting, transit, biking, walking, carpooling, or vanpooling. So finish strong, guys, and thanks so much for joining us.
I'll see you. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thanks, Lisa.